can, we'll get everybody else back up on the videos. We have been keeping track of a lot of the questions that have come across both on Discord, and then I think we've got a couple that came in from YouTube. So this is where I make my money, and I'm not making any money. So bear with me as I try to run us all through the Q&A session here, and I try to get all of your questions out so that everybody can do their presentations. One quick second, let me make sure my alarm doesn't go off. So gentlemen, if you will, I will give you all the questions that we've been getting. I'll ask if you would please keep your answers to about 2 minutes or so. That way we get a chance to let everybody have another hack at things and give their opinions. So the first question, I'm going to go with our first presenter. This will go to Brian. So first up, the question we got is, should the Space Marine hymn officially be Alice Cooper's Space Pirates? Of course, then secondly, the next question is, if you consider the support to warfighter ratio of conventional Marines at 5+ to 1, would Space Marines have a similar footprint? So I actually, when I pre-canned some of these questions, I had something very, very close. Of course, my first question was, how much do you want to be a space shuttle door gunner right now? But then, all joking aside, I also asked about with the Space Marines. Do you think that's an accurate title? And what do you think that ratio is for like the small force versus a larger conventional force?
Well, I'm not sure which to answer first. I might as well go with the fun one, talk about the theme. So the theme will probably come from whatever service organization that operation is big under the auspices of. It will not likely. It would not likely be a town service. The 5 to 1 is going to be a lot more than that. There's going to be a lot of contractors involved, for starters. And with respect to current astronaut operations, if you look at NASA, even putting contractors aside, just looking at civilian NASA versus astronaut on a given mission, the ratio is easily 10,001, maybe even 100,001. So much more. And that's likely to be, I would say, roughly consistent, possibly not within that battalion level organization that I outlined, maybe closer to 1,000 to 1, but that's probably about right.
All right, thank you very much. Now, my next question, this is going to be for Tom. So the question that came across for you, Tom, is attacking communications more valuable than blinding the lower altitude intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance satellites, should be ISR?
So we're talking about attacking, so the Eve world doesn't really have satellites. I think that might be for our first presenter, who was looking at different levels of
okay, sorry.
Orbits.
I think that might have been one of mine too. I'll try to make the answer quick so Tom can get some words in as well. But the problem is lower, and this is one of the reasons we broke out the orbital regimes. Lower satellites, it's very difficult. It's a one-off mission. Unless all of your targets are in the same plane, which is unlikely. Low Earth constellations are very difficult to maneuver between, compared to GEO, where, as I pointed out on one slide, for about 50 meters per second, you can get a pretty quick transit, as we call it. Compared to low Earth orbit, you need meters of delta V, meters per second of delta V, rather, which is a considerable fraction of what you'd see in a heavy launch vehicle, simply to change planes because objects are. So that's the main problem with trying to use Space Marines against ISR. You're probably better off trying to do something from a ground-based system than employing Space Marines in situ.
All right, thank you. Okay, so this one I know is going to be for Tom. I know because I wrote it. So Tom, listening to your talk about Eve, one of the things that this was reminiscent of for me was Ender's Game, where we're talking about the simulations and things like that. So I think stepping back just a little bit, when we look at these scenarios and war games that start blurring the lines between war and game, so I guess my question is, other than Eve, what other games do you see that are out there today that you could start getting that level of tactical and strategical insight?
So I got to be honest with you, I don't know any other games that even remotely approach the level of Eve for that sort of thing, and particularly with its application to what we do in the Navy. I mean, they're literally fleets, and you have fleet commanders that have really impressive ways that the way that they execute things and their tactical competence. If I can get a share screen for a second, I'll show you. I can show you an example of what I'm talking about. this is going to be, for example, a fleet. That video that I showed earlier, what you didn't see there, what's not clear, is that what these guys do is they're actually going to split this enemy fleet in half by precisely at the right split second dropping a warp disruption device so that part of the fleet is allowed to get away and part is not. This is classic defeat in detail. I mean, this is really good tactical employment. So I have a hard time imagining, and you just listen to these guys doing their thing. They're just really good at what they do. So anyways.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, I saw that the image of getting in there, like you said, splitting the fleet and being able to halting up. It really did feel like some of the descriptions that they had in Ender's Game. So thank you for indulging me and answering the question. So the next one, I believe, is for William. And I think I've got this one right because it was talking about, the question is, would orbit to ground fire be direct or indirect fire?
Yes, I think I saw that one. So a good example of something like that that most would recognize would probably be in the defense of Hoth, the ion cannons trying to knock out the Imperial fleet so they can get away. The way I look at it as, like, that's a directed energy weapon. So direct fire, but the way it's being employed, like the range, you're going to need to do the type of coordination. Like, this is me putting my fire sport coordinator hat from back on a battalion landing team. That the type of deconfliction you have to do, where like that shot's coming out as rebel fleets or rebel ships are alongside it, it's going to need to be deconflicted the way you would like an actual artillery round. And that's where, in these cases, directed energy weapons probably are going to be used in many ways, like, or operated maybe is a better way, or deconflicted much like an artillery unit would right now. I hope that answers the question.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, so our next question, we're going to keep going around robin. This next one is going to be from Mark. So we are talking mission command. So any thoughts on mission command versus the various stations of the Royal Manticorian Navy and its applications on the United States Navy operating in a denied environment?
So that's an interesting question. A little background for those. Whoever asked this question is obviously very familiar with the Honorverse. The better analogy would be not from today, but from days past, before the creation of speed of light communications with radios and telegraphs, where you actually had to physically carry a message, because now different star systems, unless you have a wormhole connecting them, the fastest you can get there is through hyperspace, and that could still be a matter of days and weeks, depending upon how far it is. So if you are an admiral in charge of a fleet at a station, even a valuable station like Grendelsbane, you're a good 3 or 4 weeks from getting any kind of information from higher command back on Manticore. So you have to execute mission command. You have to understand both the strategic and the tactical situation, and then be able to operate within your area of operations. And I think that's why the Honorverse does such a good job of bringing out the need to have their senior officers trained to a level both tactically and operationally for those officers that get assigned to that independent of a command. When you're out on Grendelsbane Station, there is just no way to call home. And you see that throughout the entire series, most prominently at the end of the later books of the series, at the end of the Saganami Island series, and the end of the 14th of the Honorverse series. You have Admiral Henke is halfway across the galaxy handling what is an absolute crisis, and she is a good month away from any kind of communication with her higher headquarters. And so she's got to make the decisions that she needs to make, really on nothing more than her own judgment of what she thinks will be ultimately in the strategic interests of the Star Kingdom. So, or by then the Star Empire. So, great question.
All right, thank you so much for that answer. All right, now to our last presenter. I've got one question for you. So Andy, this one is coming directly from me. So my first question, of course, is very simple, and that is, what is your favorite cosplay that you have ever created or done? Because I think in your author bio, you've got a good Ghostbusters cosplay there. Then, of course, how long did it take you to put it together? Of course, my real question is, what example in current history would you say are analogous to the Galaxy class and that bit of an arms race that it created?
Well, to answer the first question, my favorite one is probably my 2012 Mega City Judge from the film Dread. I don't know if you've seen that, but it was my first cosplay, actually. And little plug, but if you go over to my podcast, there is some episodes where I talk about that, and plenty of pictures that you can check out on there. To answer your second question, well, the obvious comparison's got to be drawn to the dreadnoughts of the early 20th century. HMS Dreadnought, which then single-handedly pretty much wiped out a massive naval supremacy that the British had, allowing the Germans to catch up, and then leading to all that fun stuff around World War I.
All right, fantastic. Let's see. Our next question, I believe, hold on, let me pull up my sheet here. This next question, we're going to go back to William. So William, for you, artillery requires gravity to guide ballistic weapons. I know you talked about directed energy and requiring a line of fire, but when it comes to an actual ballistic projectile, for the science fiction universes, how much of a lack of artillery depiction would you lay at the feet of a lack of gravity, or the fact that this is occurring in microgravity?
So I think there's even more to add to gravity, and especially if you're getting into going to another planet, it's not only going to be different gravity, you're going to have different atmosphere and a different curvature of the planet. Those are all things we actually account for now for mortar, cannon artillery, and rocket artillery fire. So that's a pretty heavy lift, I'd say, for needing to calculate all of that type of information. It kind of gets into why maybe we, in these examples, you could see something like a smaller mortar system where it's going to affect that less than investing in a big, large, like future howitzer, essentially, where you're going to need to do these huge calculations for every planet you go to.
Right, and so you're talking like a different Coriolis effect for the different size of each planet, and now I'm pulling out tables where I've got to have all these things already pre-calculated.
There's books and books of tables, and the computers help a lot, but when you're going through the school, you got to learn to do it.
Yep. All right. Well, fascinating. Thank you so much. That's a great answer. I like that. So my last question, and then I think I might have everybody just sort of an open forum to discuss each other's presentations, and if you have any questions amongst panel members. So this last question before I turn it over to you guys is for Mark. So based on what you have learned from the Honorverse, how would you apply that to current officer training? So starting just very much at the beginning in the OTS or OCS portion.
Could you say that again, Puff? You kind of broke up there just a moment.
Yep. So my question really is from what we've learned, what you learned from the Honorverse series. What would you find useful today, specifically to the initial officer training, OCS and OTS?
Absolutely. So, and I would say this would be true today, whether an officer is commissioned through a service academy, through an ROTC program, or through an OCS, OTS. From what the Honorverse theory of creating good officers is twofold, maybe threefold. One is an immersive experience to really inculcate them into the service and get buy-in. That's one of the reasons why they didn't shorten the officer program more than 3 years for individuals that had no previous military training, is because in order to get the culture the way they wanted it, it took time to inculcate that to an individual. Second is the focus for junior officers on tactics, and you can define that a lot of ways in the modern world, but in the Honorverse, that was getting junior officers that were good at operating the shipboard weapons and systems that they were going to be responsible for either operating or leading their spacers. That could be soldier, sailor, and airman, marines, and guardians today, but they're spacers in battle, and getting them very, very competent on that. And the third was the extensive use of simulations, which is something that's been discussed by different folks on the Joint Geeks of Staff. If I can give a shout out to the podcast part of the NavyCon properties, that was brought up in our discussion of the Honorverse when we had our Honorverse podcast. But extensive use of simulations in the Honorverse, something that wargaming and simulation, something that all the different services can benefit from in their junior officer training.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that answer. So I think I'm going to have to apologize, and we're going to stop here. I don't know if we've got enough time really to have you guys asking amongst yourselves, but I do want to say thank you all so much for joining us today. To Andy, to William, Brian, Mark, Tom, I really, really appreciated hearing from all of you guys. Thank you for the patience as we have to run a panel virtually. I've been a member of panels before, but it's always been sitting there, and I can always look across to see everybody beside me. So this has been unique. It's a little bit of a challenge, but I appreciate everybody coming and bearing with me. And again, to Corey, who is our producer tonight, thank you so much, Corey. So with that, I don't have a glass to raise, but a glass raised to all of you. Thank you for your presentations, and thank you so much for everything you brought tonight. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Puff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.